welcome to this channel. My name is Gabby. In this video, we're going to be going through the journey of sourdough, starting from beginning, creating your starter, and hopefully ending up baking a sourdough loaf at the end of this. Now, if you know me, you know that I had one success in making a sourdough, but unfortunately, my husband did actually bake my starter in the oven yesterday, so we're starting new, and I felt this was a perfect time to kind of walk you through the different steps that it takes to get to the final product of a sourdough loaf. All you're going to need is some flour, water, and something to hold the starter in. I prefer a mason jar, like a quart jar. You can really use anything. Just make sure that it'll be able to hold the starter as it grows and expands throughout the day. So, day one, officially it is 1:32, and we are going to start feeding and creating our starter.
Mentioned creating our starter and going on this journey together, and I encourage you to do so. But I want to say that there are plenty of other videos, I'm sure, that are available to help you really gain a better understanding of how to create your starter and how to bake your first boule. I said loaf in the previous clip, I'm sorry, sourdough boule. But this is really just to encourage you and give you the confidence to realize that you can do hard things. When I first started this, it sounded like such an ominous task, and it honestly quite terrified me. But this is just to encourage you that starting small, like starting a starter, seems insignificant or seems scary or whatnot. But when it comes down to it, you just have to take the first step, and that's what we're going to do today. So I just got out some flour. I used bread flour to make this. I'm showing you that I'm using 1/3 of a cup measuring cup. I know it's not super clear or concise, but that is what I was showing you, and that is what I'll be using to scoop out the flour for each day that I'm doing this. And then I use 1/4 of a cup of water to mix all the things, mix the flour together to make the starter. And I know people say to use a wooden spoon and metal isn't good, or it's not what you think it is, or it doesn't do what I've used a metal spoon every time being twice now, and it's worked perfectly fine. I don't have a wooden spoon, oddly enough. I feel like it's something that everyone has in their kitchen, but I just simply don't have one. So as you saw there, I just put 1/3 of a cup of flour in and then mixed in 1/4 cup of water. I typically do a little bit higher than room temperature. I like it a little bit warmer as it is winter in the current months. I know it doesn't look like it based on what I'm wearing, but I just like to feel pretty when it looks ugly outside. So like I said, I used a little bit warmer than room temperature water. I feel like that maybe helps in the growing process and the fermenting process. It might not. It's just something in my head, and I've done it every time since. So that's just what I stick with. And this is just me showing you what that looks like. I know I said only things you need are going to be flour, water, and something to hold it in. That is partly true, but there are some extra things that you might need in starting your starter. One of them being a rubber band, could be a hair tie, could be a piece of string, anything to show where you had it the previous day so you can see the growth that happens overnight. Here I'm grabbing just the top. Now, you want to get something that's breathable. I know that there are cups you can use that allow air into it, but as you saw there, I just leave a little gap when I put it in the oven overnight, and I'm putting it in the oven to create a warmer space. As I said, it's winter, so things are super unregulated in terms of the temperature of the kitchen. Some days it's super hot, some days it's super cold, and I can't really, dictate what happens in that, but I do know that my oven stays the same temperature, roughly the same temperature, so that's what I store it in. Now we're on day 2. As you can see, there wasn't much development that happened overnight. We didn't really grow. There wasn't any bubbles. It just kind of looked like how we had it before. Now I'm grabbing a jar to hold discard, and before I have an actual live good starter, I don't typically keep discard. It's not the best, let's just say that. It wouldn't work in discard recipes as well as a fully fermented, active sourdough starter once you've baked the original loaf. So I'm just doing this in order to show you all the color changes over time, just so you can see kind of what that looks like and you can understand the fermenting process a little bit more, because when I first started this, I didn't quite understand the purpose or really what that meant. People just would say bulk fermenting, and I was like, what is that? It's just how it changes over time and how the yeast starts to develop and create this beautiful starter that you want. So again, I scooped out nearly all of the starter that I had. I just want to give it more room to eat and grow. So I refilled it with a third cup, added my water, mixed it together, and that was me showing you kind of the consistency that I used. And now we're on day 3. Day 3, again, still really no change, but as you can see, there's a little baby bubble there. Just a little baby bubble, and that, you can't hear the audio of the original clip, but I was so excited. And then this is what it looked like after I fed it. Again, I don't want to take you through the process every single day of me feeding it, because I did the same thing every single day. And now we're on day 4. Now we got a few more bubbles. As you can see, there's 3, maybe 4 bubbles brewing. It hasn't grown. I just tipped the jar, so it looks like it grew, but it didn't. But this is what I was talking about, that color change. So you see how bright and light that top discard is compared to the rest? That's when I've noticed things are starting to change and starting to shift. Again, fed it, gonna put it away, move the rubber band up a little bit, because I actually fed it a little bit more in terms of how much I discarded. So I think I left a little bit extra in there. I give it something because I felt like it was finally starting to shift and move into the positive direction. So it's like an eighth of an inch taller. It's nothing serious, I promise. If it was significant, I would have shown in you, but it's not. Okay, so we've made it to day 5. We are officially moving and grooving here. No growth, but plenty of bubbles. Plenty of bubbles. I am loving the way that this is looking. As you can tell, I'm like modeling it because I'm so excited about it. Fed it as per usual. This is the consistency that I left it with. He's starting to get a little bit hungrier, so I'm starting to use less of a extra water and make sure I'm really focusing on the flour so he has something to eat, because the starter's eating the flour. The water is just there to kind of aid it along, kind of speed it up a little bit. Again, no growth here. It almost looks like we've gone backwards, but as you can see, this is a little bit thicker than we've seen. Still not enough to start baking, but we're starting to see a little bit of difference there, a little bit of growth. Now we're on day 5, day 6, I believe. And again, nothing too drastic, a little bit thicker. You can see the way that it takes its time to come down from the walls, which is good news for me. Means it's starting to actually work. And I believe on day 7 is when things start to turn around. Y'all, you can see it on my face. I am ecstatic. And I was listening there to see if I could hear some bubbles. I mean, look at all of those beautiful bubbles. And it's grown exponentially. It is twice, if not 3 times. As you can see, we started there and now we're up at the top. So super, super happy with how this looks. I just love when a starter looks happy. Here I am filling up some water in a measuring cup so I can do the float test. So the float test is how you can tell if your sourdough is ready. Now, if you're looking at sourdough starter and yours looks like that and you hear crackling and bubbling, chances are it's ready to go. But I just wanted to make sure, double check. I might get ahead of myself sometimes, so I just really wanted to make sure. And this is really the moment of truth. As you can tell, I was a little nervous to put it in because I was so excited and I wanted to bake that day or start the baking process. And when this floated, guys, I was so ecstatic. I was like, guys, look, I wanted to show you how much it floated, because the last time I baked the first loaf or boule, it didn't float like that. I almost convinced myself that it was floating, So this was a true float test and I was super excited. Here I'm filling a cup and a half, I believe. I'm using Hopeless Heights baking sourdough artisan bread video. So I will link that below. She does an incredible, if not fantastic, job of explaining everything you need to know. She also tells you how to completely start a starter. I learned from her. So all of this is from her. Stephanie is amazing. But I will have that recipe linked. I believe it's 1.5 cups of water, and I'm putting it in a clear bowl so you can see kind of what's happening. You couldn't tell, but I was showing you that it was a measuring cup, and I am putting all of my starter into that cup. When I flip it over, you can see that I'm not fully at a cup yet, but again, I was a little too excited, so I didn't really mind that it wasn't a full cup. Roughly a cup was enough. It got me in the same place regardless. So again, just putting that cup of sourdough starter in this 1.5 cups of water. I would say I had it nearly room temperature, if not just a little bit warmer. Like I said, I'm just used to doing that, so that's kind of what I stuck with. I'm making sure every single drop gets out because I didn't reach the full cup. I just wanted to make sure it was going to bake the way that it should bake, at least. Now here I am grabbing a spatula. I don't have any wooden tools. This is the closest thing I have to a wood tool. And I'm just spinning that around, kind of making sure that they're equally dissolved within each other. I shouldn't be able to see sourdough in clumps at the top of my water. I kind of want to make sure that they're fully incorporated with each other. Now, I don't want to spend too much time mixing it all together because I don't want to knead it, basically. I don't want to create pockets of yeast and start that process without me adding what needs to be added, which here is roughly 3 cups of flour. I was at the end of my bag on this one, so I got nearly a cup out of that bag, and then you'll see I'm mixing the water, sourdough starter, and the flour together. What you're aiming for is something tangibly thicker than what you started with. So as you can see, I clearly need some more, and I just kind of threw it in there. I think all of that together probably equaled a cup. So now I'm opening the second bag, which I luckily had bought in advance because I was hoping that I would be able to bake soon. There's that full second cup that I'm mixing in. And sometimes it doesn't take the full 3 cups. Sometimes it's 2.5. Sometimes it's the full 3. Sometimes it could be 2. Just kind of depends on how your starter looks. I would say it was more hydrated than the last time I baked, but it wasn't so watery that it wouldn't take, 3 cups to make a proper dough. So again, I showed you that was 2. I'm adding 2.5 right now. I just kind of want to see the consistency of that. But as you could see, that was a little too liquidy. Our end goal is to create a really good dough with, and that just wasn't gonna cut it, honestly. So again, I still needed some more. This was more hydrated, like I was saying, than the last time that I baked. So I spent a little more time adding. I think it would have been better if I had spooned 3 full just from the real bag and used the extra for when I'm feeding my starter after this. Because again, you do need to keep it going. Once you've created a good starter, you need to make sure that it's properly fed and continue this. It's the same process. So 1/3 cup of flour and then 1/4 cup of lukewarm / a little bit warmer water. And I'm showing you that dough because that's roughly where I want it to be. I think I should have added just a little bit more to make it a little bit shaggier. That's how Stephanie describes it. And my original dough did look like that, and it rose a little bit better. But I set that aside for 30 minutes. I put a tea towel over it. I'm not really sure what it does, but I've seen a lot of people do it, so I did it as well. And I'm adding a tablespoon of salt. Again, following Stephanie's recipe, she says that this is a better way to do it, and I trust her solely. So that is what I'm doing here, and I'm mixing it so it's incorporated. But one thing I did notice going over this footage, I spent a little too much time trying to incorporate this salt, and I think that's what ultimately led to a poorer result. It's still a beautiful loaf. I'm still enjoying it. I still love eating it every single day, but I think that is the key difference that happened. So after I added that salt, I'm going to let that sit and proof or bulk ferment in my oven again for 30 minutes. If it's summertime when you're watching this video, or a little bit warmer in your house altogether, you should be able to leave it on the counter. It should be fine. But again, like I said, it's a little bit chillier here. So I just put it in the oven to let it have the best chance of rising. And now I'm working on my stretch and folds. So as you can see, big old stretch and then folding it over. I do 3 to 4 turns. I believe I go clockwise or I move it counterclockwise. Okay. And then again, covering it with that tea towel, and I do it 2 more times. It's not shown here, but I let it sit for 30 minutes and then I do another set of stretch and folds and then 30 minutes again and another set. My husband actually did this because I had an errand to run, so super sweet. Very, very grateful to him. Checking at that dough after the 3rd stretch and fold, and it's not looking the same. It's not looking how I would like it to look, but I'm going to still continue with this because, again, this is a journey. It's not going to be perfect. I am 2 weeks into my sourdough journey, so it's not going to be perfect, and I have to realize that it's not going to be. So I decided to keep going because, I needed bread, and I thought this would be good to show that it's not going to be perfect every single time, but you'll still have an awesome product when you're done with it and something to be proud of. And that's the most important thing. Starting this journey of trying new hobbies and things, I've found the greatest joy I have is in the final product, whether it looks homemade or not. It's just spending the time and knowing that I took the time to create something with my hands is just something I'm really, really, really enjoying at the moment. So here I have put some flour on the counter. I don't have like an actual good wood table as a baker would, but this works just fine. So I stretched it to make it a rectangular shape, and then I did a trifold, kind of like you would with a tea towel, and I just folded that, and then I rolled it on itself to create this sweet little dough ball. It's not as elastic as I would like. As you can tell, it's kind of sticking to me and to the counter. Again, lack of flour, lack of time. I did actually, now that I'm remembering this, I did actually let this sit a little while longer, and I could say that I was experimenting, but the truth is I was still running that errand, and that errand took a lot longer than I expected. So I let it sit after the final stretch and fold for an hour versus the 30 minutes that I would recommend. And that is what I think led to it not rising as much. I think it did rise, and then it might have fallen and created this kind of sticky mess. So as you saw, I just picked it up with a bench scraper, and then I put it in a Banneton basket. I've heard that you can actually use just like a regular bowl and then put a tea towel or a plastic bag around it, and it works just fine. I just got it for Christmas. I was super grateful, and so that's what I used. It is not required, so don't think you have to go buy one, because you don't. You just take a bowl and then you put a tea towel inside that bowl, and I know it works just fine. So I let that sit overnight. You can tell by the outfit change, it's a new day. Let that rise overnight, and then here I'm just taking my Dutch oven and heating it up to 425 degrees. As I let my oven heat up, I also let my Dutch oven heat up, because I've heard, I don't quite know the science behind it, but it's better that your Dutch oven is warm or at the degree that it's going to be baking in, so there's no difference in temperature or shock value. So I just let it heat up in there. It's totally fine. Went and grabbed my overnight bowl that I created and then put it on some parchment. It wasn't in the middle, and my OCD was not having it, so I did move it into the middle. You don't have to do that. Adding more flour on top of it, and then I'm going to start scoring it. And scoring is quite literally my favorite part. This actually came with the set that I got with the Banneton baskets, so I didn't buy this myself, but you could just use a razor if you have one. I don't know if you would have one lying around, but if you do, you can just score it that way. I've seen people use knives, and that works just fine too. The only thing you're doing really is creating places for the steam to escape while you're baking it, because as it's in the oven, obviously it's growing, it's expanding, but without cutting these strips in it, or, lines or beautiful, beautiful designs that I've seen, you're not giving it a space to fully expand, and God forbid it actually explodes, or it doesn't come out the way that you would want it to come out. It might create its own places for it to expand, and that might not be as pretty as if you put beautiful lines like I am. And again, completely following Stephanie's recipe here. She even does this exact design. I've done it twice now, and I still think it's beautiful. So I would like to experiment a little bit more with some scoring designs, but as of right now, we're sticking to the basics here. my oven preheated to 425. I'm pulling that out. A lot of times I have to remind myself that it is hot and I need to not touch it with my bare hands. So now I'm just going to take my completed sourdough and just plopping it right in there. As you can see, it's just sitting in there. I didn't add any ice cubes for steam. I haven't tried that yet. I would like to try that. But again, sticking to the basics right now because I just really needed some bread. Sticking it in there. My oven's a little bit different. I did bake it for 30 minutes uncovered. And then as you saw, that's what it looks like after 30 minutes. And then I let it bake for another 20, I believe. Yes, another 20 after that. And this is what it came out to. Now, one thing I do recommend, the biggest thing I learned last time, I immediately put this on the plate that it was going to sit in. As you can see, that little cake stand on the back, I plopped it right in there. And as it cooled, I let it cool overnight. It became rock hard because there was nowhere for the heat to escape. As it comes out of the oven, it's still baking. It's still doing its thing. So why I never thought to put it on a cooling rack to let it properly cool, I have no idea. But this time I made sure I did put it on a cooling rack and the bottom was not as hard. And then I'm just putting it in this little bento bag that I created and I just love it. I will be doing a video on how to make a bento bag, so stay tuned for that. But I cut into it nearly 24 hours later. I think I was just shy of it, and this is what I created with it. So thank you guys so much for following along. I'm glad we ended on a positive note and we did get a full loaf.